Hey everybody, welcome to Bill Sky, the Linux guy, and I'm just starting this new playlist in my channel, Bill Sky, the computer guy, after reaching 1,000 subscribers. So for those of you that have been out there and have been watching my videos, thanks a lot. It doesn't do me any good, but it makes me want to do even more of these because a lot of you like these videos. Some of you don't, but that's okay. Everybody has a right to decide. And I'm wearing a different hat today because I've had a number of subscribers ask me to wear this hat once I reached 1,000 subscribers. And some people thought this was a black hat. It's really not. It's actually an Indiana Jones type brown hat. But anyway, so with that said, what are we going to do in this series or this playlist on Bill Sky, the Linux guy? And what we're going to do is we're going to show you all about the Linux operating system. Today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about why you should learn it, why it's important, and we're actually going to do a demonstration of installing a Red Hat Enterprise Linux offshoot for community use called CentOS, Community Enterprise OS. And I'm going to download it. We're going to do it on Virtualbox. And a lot of the videos that I do with Linux are using Debian Linux. I'm also going to have a link to a video on how to do that from my assembly language playlist. But let's do CentOS. And why am I picking CentOS? Because it's kind of in between Red Hat Linux and Fedora Linux in stability, in usage, and we're going to talk about all of that stuff. But before we actually get into that, why should you learn Linux? Well, Linux is an offshoot, an open source offshoot of the Unix operating system. Unix was originally written to support software and hardware developers, so it's really a great environment for the developers, the software developers. That's just a fact. It just is really, really useful for that. Also, Unix, well, Linux came from Unix. So Unix was an operating system that was created in the mid-1960s, and it was originally set up as a mainframe time-sharing operating system. So security was on top of it. I mean, they were on top of security from day one. Where operating systems like Windows actually got its offshoot from DOS, which was really a single-use only operating system for the general personal computer user, somebody sitting at home on their couch or in their office at home. So it didn't really need the security. But Unix, from mainframe times, time-sharing times as well, actually needed security from day one. And what Unix stands for is Uniplexed Information and Computing Service. And Uniplex simply means that multiple users could log in. Some people might ask me what time sharing is. Time sharing is a way that we used to actually use a computer where you would get a slice of time of the CPU. Nobody else could get it for that amount of time. And so you would be sharing it, sharing the CPU. Today, the operating systems are much more sophisticated. They allow multiple users, I mean thousands or even millions of users at the same time on the CPU. But it's still, in a way, it still is kind of time sharing where you're sharing the CPU. And but the operating system does that itself automatically. It multiplexes, which means that it uses this user, then uses this one, then goes to this one, then goes back to the first one. So it's actually it's just a really good operating system from the bottom up. And originally Unix was written in 100% assembly language, but then it was later rewritten using the C language. And I believe the reason why it didn't use the C language, or it wasn't written in the C language, is because C wasn't really 100% cooked yet. So it was written in assembly language, then it was written in the C language in the mid-1970s with, obviously, some assembly language additions or parts to it were assembly language, because that's all you could really do. Even C didn't allow you to do everything on the CPU. And then it was standardized. Unix was then standardized on a version called POSIX, P-O-S-I-X, which is actually still used today. A lot of tools within Unix use the POSIX standard in the early 1980s. And that was originally done at the Bell Labs, Southwestern Bell, Pacific Bell, the phone companies. And then it was extended into the Solaris operating system by Sun Microsystems. And IBM even had its own operating system called AIX that ran on its RISC, its RISC 6000 computers, which were really considered workstations, not so much mainframes, but workstations, used a lot for servers. And then Linux itself showed itself in the early 1990s as an open source operating system modeled after Unix. It wasn't actually Unix rewritten. It was, or I should say, Unix transformed into Linux. Unix is still out there, but Linux was a rewrite of Unix, and using its own kernel. We're going to talk about what all that means later on. And Linux today is an operating system much like Windows, where you have a graphical user interface, and the distributions are everywhere. There are just thousands of distributions. I really think there are, or maybe hundreds. But everybody and their grandfather or grandmother have written an operating system like Linux, and you can even write your own Linux. And I'll even go through that in this playlist. How do I actually start writing my own Linux? And if you're got to have a master's degree in computer science or even coding, a master's degree, that type of a program requires you to write parts of an operating system. So the operating system Linux has evolved into a reliable and secure server operating system that are used by most cloud services, IBM, Microsoft, Azure. Yes, even Microsoft, the Azure servers are based on Linux or using Linux. I don't know which one, but it wasn't a surprise when I read that. And I read it from the Microsoft website. So Dropbox, Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, they all use Linux. They're not using Windows. I mean, some might, but the huge majority are using Linux or Unix. In the case of IBM, they might be using AIX, they might be using ZOS, which has its own Unix add-on. Take a look at my Bill Sky the Mainframe Guide for information on how you can actually touch on a mainframe operating system. So what are the different Linux distributions? I might have mentioned that earlier. Well, I'm going to bring up my browser, and I'm on my Mac right now, and I'm just going to do a search for list of Linux distributions, and you're going to find a ton of them. List of Linux distributions in Wikipedia is just has a huge number of them. Now, a lot of these have been stopped. They've actually stopped being supported, but there's just a huge number of them. But really, once you learn two different distributions, maybe I should say three, Red Hat, Arch, and Debian, you should be all set. You should be able to download any one of these distributions yourself and be productive in it. And the nice thing about Linux is that the Linuxes, or Linux, whatever the plural is for Linux, a lot of the commands, I would say a majority of the commands are common. So one of them I wanted to talk about, I mentioned Red Hat. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the top of this document and I'm going to look for Red Hat. And Red Hat is considered an RPM-based. RPM stands for Red Hat Package Manager. And that is how you install things. Debian is .deb, and that is, I'm not sure what Debian stands for, but that may just be the name. But DEB are the installation files that you would use. RPM are the installation files you would use. And then there's also the Arch, and I could do a search for Arch here, and I believe that's Pacman. Yep, here we go. Yep, Pacman. Arch Linux-based Linuxes are using this whole package manager called Pacman, and Pacman obviously stands, not the game, but Pacman actually stands for Package Manager. So we're going to touch on all of those, but what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you how to install CentOS, which is an RPM or Red Hat Linux. And I'm also going to show you where to go to get these things. So we're going to look at downloading CentOS. I'm going to show you how to get an ID for a free Red Hat as a developer, and we might even do some Arch. However, we're going to shy away from Arch because this is really an introductory playlist, and I don't want to get too deep in it because a lot of you, well, I should say too deep into the underlying command line where that's all you do, that's all you can do, because many of you are probably coming from a Windows environment. So let's take a look at where we can get our Linux distributions. So I'm going to go ahead and download CentOS. So I'm going to type CentOS download. Now, CentOS has changed the way that they allow you to, or that the packages that they have. There used to be a CentOS 7, a CentOS 8. You can see the 7 2009 here. And these are the older versions. These are the older versions of CentOS. And what we want is we want the most recent. So I'm going to click on the CentOS stream, and you can see that we've got 8 and 9. Now, I've not done a lot of research on what the difference is between CentOS stream and CentOS Linux. I leave that to you, but it's just a different way of packaging it. And we're going to go ahead and download the 9. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to download the actual ISO disk. And what we're going to do is we're going to use Virtualbox. Now, you can use VMware, which I highly recommend. I'm going to even show you where to go get that. You could even use some Windows hypervisor. You could use that Windows hypervisor to do this. But I want to do this in such a way where it's completely free to you. So I'm going to go ahead and go to 9 here. And we're going to download the ISO disk. And then we're going to mount that in Virtualbox. We're going to create a virtual machine. And we're going to talk about what Virtualbox and VMware and hypervisors are all about as well. Now, we're going to do this with CentOS, which is an RPM, or Red Hat Package Management operating system, but I'm also going to have a link in this video on how to do a Mint Linux. I believe it might even be an Ubuntu Linux, so I'm going to show you all that as well, or that is actually in another document, another video. So you have to download the one that you think is appropriate to your hardware platform. And most of us are going to be using x86-64, but you can see that you've got ARM64, which is basically like a Raspberry Pi. IBM Power PC processor computers, you could download it for that, or you can even download it for the IBM Z, which is the mainframe operating system, which runs the world. I mean, whether you like it or not, it does. It is the backbone of most everything, data, everything. So we're going to download the x86-64, so I'm going to click on that, and you don't see it, but what's downloading right now is the .iso file. Now, that's going to take a little while because that's 10.22 gigabytes. That's going to download everything. But once you download it, that's it. You don't have to do anything online. You don't have to do anything online anymore. So while that's downloading, I'm going to go ahead and open up another tab, and I'm going to download Virtualbox. So I'm going to say Virtualbox download. And you want to look for the virtualbox.org, or you want to look for the Oracle VM Virtualbox. I'm going to click on the downloads for Oracle VM Virtualbox. And you want to make sure that URL is the same, that you're not going somewhere else that you shouldn't be going. And you have to decide which Virtualbox you want to download. Now, what is Virtualbox? Virtualbox allows you to run an entire operating system or multiple operating systems on the same computer without dual booting. I've got Windows, Mac OS running right here, and what Virtualbox allows me to do is it allows me to run as many operating systems as I want. So you have to decide which one. Now, there's two different terms. There's host and guest. The host operating system is the one that actually is the hardware. In this case, it's a Mac, so I would want to download the Mac. But if you're on a PC, personal computer running Windows as the main operating system, you want to download the Windows host. But also notice you can download, if you have a PC running Linux, you can download those, or even a Solaris, which is actually, I believe it's Oracle now, owns Solaris. So I'm going to download the Mac OS Intel hosts, and that's downloading, and that doesn't take very long. Now, once you download that, you want to also download the Oracle VM Virtualbox extension pack, which is right below it. So you want to click on that, and that's going to download a file. So you can see that I've got my Virtualbox right here that downloaded. It's a DMG file. And then we've got our extension pack. So if you're on Windows, it's going to download an executable. Just go ahead and run that installation program. Everything will be great. It's very, very easy to install. And then once you install that, once you install the main executable, you then want to double click on the Oracle VM Virtualbox extension pack file that you downloaded. What that will do is it will start Virtualbox and it will install that extension pack, and we're going to talk about what that is. Well, I'll talk about it right now because I'm still downloading CentOS Stream 9. The extension pack allows you to do things like drag and drop from the main operating system to the guest operating system, copy and paste, all kinds of really neat things to share. So it's less of a transition from the main operating system to the guest. So I'm going to go ahead and let that continue to download. Now, I'm not going to install VirtualBox. It's a very simple installation process. But I'm not going to install it because I've already got it installed. But what I am going to do is I'm going to start it up over here. And here's VirtualBox. Now, while it's downloading, I'm going to show you all the things that you can do. There's just, look at all of these operating systems I have installed. I've got Mint Linux Mate, I've got Mint Linux Cinnamon, I've got Mint Linux SFCE, a Zorn Core. I even have Windows. I've got old PC-DOS Windows 10. But I also have VMware that has a lot more, because the VMware is something you have to buy. It's not really expensive, but it is supported, and you get a lot of features with it. So, and here's Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. So I can run any of these. Like, I'm going to go ahead and just double click on the PC-DOS, and what that did was it opened up a window, and now I've got PC-DOS running a little window here. This is PC-DOS 2000. And I can go in here and load up my favorite editor. Oh, let's just say oh, I got some problems with the personal editor. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there, but I can run Windows 3.11. So it's all running inside of this little window that I've got. On my operating systems, I always like to do the absolute minimum password. So I'll always do a password like password, because I don't ever let anybody get into my operating systems. And there you can see that I've got my Windows 3.11 running on my PC-DOS. But also notice I've got these other windows open. So, or I've got the VirtualBox open here. So I'm going to actually start up Mint Linux Cinnamon. So you can see how I've got multiple operating systems running on the same main computer, on the same host. Now, my operating system, my host operating system is Mac OS, and each one of these is a guest. Now, I don't have CentOS running here or installed here, so that's great. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And what do we got here? Let's see how our download's looking up. It looks like the download did not complete, but it's at 6.85, so it will complete. I already have that ISO disk, so we'll get to that installation. So here is Mint Linux Cinnamon running. You can even hear, maybe you could hear that there was some sound. I'm going to go ahead and stretch this. So I'm going to go up here and say View Scale Mode. And now I can stretch this to make it bigger so it's easier to see. Pretty neat. VirtualBox is 100% free. I could even start up my Windows 10. So I'm running a very, very powerful Mac Pro here. Not MacBook Pro, but a Mac Pro desktop. And it's got, I think I have like 256 gigabytes of memory. I've got like 32 processor cores. So I can run, I've actually tried it where I've run 32 different operating systems at the same time. To be fair, using VMware, not VirtualBox. One other thing I wanted to mention was that there's another virtualization program out there called Parallels, which I really steer all of my students and people on YouTube away from, because it's a subscription service. And once the subscription is over, if you don't keep paying them, you can't use Parallels anymore. And Parallels is really meant to be a Mac OS program that lets you run Windows applications on your Mac OS. So it doesn't have as great of support as Red Hat Linux does, in my opinion, in my experience. And also it's a subscription service, and I really don't like subscription services. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and shut down both this Windows and my DOS, and I can go up here and say machine ACPI shutdown. I can't do that on the old Windows. So let's go ahead and close the old Windows. Actually, I'm just going to press the close button here and ask me what do I want to do. I'm just going to power it off because DOS doesn't have multiple users logged into it. It doesn't have a lot of disk cache or anything like that. So I'm just going to power it off as if I click off the power button. Okay, so let's see how our download is going. Looks good. So CentOS was downloaded. There's CentOS right there. Now I don't have to install VirtualBox. I'm going to assume that you did that. And I'm going to create a new guest operating system for CentOS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to File and say, or Machine, and say New. And from there I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it CentOS Stream 9, 64-bit. Now normally I don't like spaces in my name, so I'm going to replace those with underscores. It asked me where I want to store it. I'm just going to go ahead and store it in a default location. I'm going to say none selected, and it's just because I like to do all this manually, and it's a good idea to do that. I'm going to select Linux as the type, and I'm going to drop down Red Hat, and I'm going to look to see if they have a CentOS. Well, they really don't have a CentOS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select Red Hat 64-bit. And I'm going to click Next. I think I'm going to give it 4096 memory. So I'm specifying the amount of memory. I want to use 2 processors. You really don't need more than that on a Linux. And I'm going to say Next. It asks me how big of a disk I want. 20 gigabytes should be enough. I always like making it 40 gigabytes. Now, what is this doing? This is actually going to create what they call a virtual disk. It's an actual file on your computer's hard drive that's going to look like a hard drive to CentOS, to the Linux, almost like you're taking a 40 gigabyte hard drive and plugging it into your computer. So it's pretty neat. So I'm going to make that 40 and then press Next. And it looks good, so I'm just going to say Finish. Now what that's going to do is it's going to stick a new CentOS virtual guest down here in your list. Now what I want to do from there though is I'm not ready to go yet. I want to click Properties and then Settings, or pretty much Settings. I'm going to go over here to Storage, and you can see right here the IDE controller, the optical drive is empty. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to click on this little icon to the right, and I'm going to choose a disk file. And now I'm going to go to Downloads, and I'm going to find my CentOS. There it is right there. Now I've got a couple of different ones here, so I'm going to go to List and make sure I've got the one I just downloaded. And there it is right there. I'm glad I did that. So I downloaded that one, and I'm click Open, and I'm going to click OK. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Start. Now that file that downloaded, that ISO file that downloaded, that was an optical drive file. And what that allows me to do is like have a CD-ROM or a DVD as actual as if it's a physical drive that or physical media that I've inserted in my CD-ROM drive. Now let me go ahead and go to scaled mode here so we can see this a little bit closer. Okay, so I've got some options here. I can select Install, I can test this media, and then Install, or I can click Troubleshooting. Well, I'm just going to install. The test the media is if you actually got a physical DVD disc from the CentOS people and you want to actually test to make sure it was okay. Okay, so I've stopped my recording and I restarted it again so I can make the resolution smaller, so the video file would be smaller on YouTube. Wherever I'm storing this. And I went ahead and let this continue to boot. So now my Linux is booted up. It asked me what language that I want, or what, well, not what language, but it asked me what country I'm from. Now, what I find interesting is that during the installation or during the booting of it, if I'm in scaled mode, I can't move my mouse past the far right. This is one of the problems with VirtualBox. It's free, but there are some irritating features about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to turn off scaled mode, and it's kind of small here, so I'll zoom in on the video. And I'm going to pick the country, so I can pick just about any country, any language I want. I'm going to pick English and English United States and click Continue. And then it gives me a whole lot of options. Now this installation is exactly the same as it is on Red Hat and Fedora Linux, which are both RPM Linux distributions. And it kind of shows you some things that you need to do here. So I'm going to click on the root password. I'm just going to give it a password of password. And then I'm going to click done. Now it's going to tell me here that my password is kind of lame because it's just the word password. I'm going to click done again. And then I'm going to click user creation. And I'm going to give it a name. I always like Linux user. And down here on the actual, that's the full name. And down here on the username, I'm just going to say Linux user. And I'm going to make it an administrator. I'm going to, on password, I'm going to do the same thing. Just say password twice, and then click done twice. And by the way, it's telling me that that's a lame password is 100% correct. Password is a lame password. If you were doing this on a server, you want to have a good, solid password. And in fact, even for root, it needs to be even more. And we're going to talk about what the difference is between root and a user during these sets of videos. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead to installation destination. And it's kind of weird because this is the only hard drive, but you kind of have to click on it once and then twice and then say done. And then now it should be no longer yellow, so I've picked it. Something else I like to do is I like to turn off kdump, but we're going to leave all this as default. And then I can come down here and click on software source. Now this is a server with a GUI. I could pick a server without a GUI. I could pick a minimal install. So there's all kinds of different things you can pick. I'm just going to pick a server with a GUI because we're going to be going through how to install different components. And then down here you can pick all the different components that you want to install. We're going to do that manually later on. We just want to get the install done. I'm going to click on done. Now if the resolution of some of this text is kind of bad, this is kind of Virtualbox's fault. So let's go ahead and begin the installation. And it's going to take a little while, so we're going to let this go ahead and finish the installation. Okay, so as you can see, we've got Linux, CentOS Linux 9 is done, and I'm going to click on Reboot System. So once the installation is complete, go ahead and click on Reboot System, and hopefully the resolution is going to get better in this video as we get the tools and everything installed. Now, after you get CentOS installed, or after you get Debian installed, any of them, you want to insert the Virtualbox features disk. I'll show you that in just a moment here. So this, again, is booting up CentOS, not your entire computer, but just in the virtual operating system. And I'm going to click on Linux user, and we're going to say password. Now, I don't know if I showed you, but you need to click on make this user an administrator when you create the user. And hopefully I added that to the video. It asks you if you want to take a tour. If I were you the first time, I would go ahead and take the tour. I'm going to say no thanks for now. And let's go ahead and install the add-ons for Virtualbox. So if you're using Virtualbox on Windows, the menu is right on top of the Virtualbox window. But on Mac, it's not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my guest, and I'm going to go to Devices, Insert Guest Edition CD Image. And it's going to ask, well, what do you want to do? Now, it happens differently on every Linux operating system, but on CentOS, it asks me, do I want to actually run it? I'm going to click on Run. It asks me for my Linux user password. Now, because we turned on Administrator, I can do things in an administrator, and it's going to go ahead and install some features. All right, so let's see what it says. Press return to close this window. I'm going to press return. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to the little power button, and I'm going to go to power off, log out, click on restart, and click the restart button. And this is going to reboot it. Any kind of drivers or any kind of special things that you set up on that are now going to be available to you. Now the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to update the system. Even though you've installed everything, you haven't actually maybe installed all of the most recent packages. So let's get this. This will be your first Linux command. And there's a couple of different ways you can install it. You can install it using a graphical tool, or you can install it using the terminal, the command line tool. I'm going to show you the graphical tool, but I'm also going to show you the command line tool. So let's go ahead and click Linux user and put in our password, which is very easy to remember. It was just password. Now, first thing to notice in the graphical user interface, you're kind of like zoomed out, and you have different desktops here. So I'm going to just click on the center of the first desktop, and I'm going to go up to activities, and I'm going to go to type a search. I'm going to do a software. Well, there's software. Let's see if we've got update. Yep, so to get to updates, I'm going to click on software. Now, if I was doing this on the terminal, I'd be done by now. But the GUI is a little bit more involved. I'm going to click on updates. It says I'm up to date, but I don't believe it. So this is where you would normally update your apps. So what I'm going to do now, instead, I'm going to click activities, and I'm going to go down here on this little terminal icon. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to type in sudo. That stands for super user do DNF update. DNF is the package manager. It used to be Yum, but it asked me to type in my password. And now what it's doing is it's downloading all of the catalogs. It's downloading everything it needs to know on what needs to be updated. Notice with the terminal, we didn't have to go looking for anything. Oh, it is. Everything is complete. So if we did have updates that we needed to install, it would go ahead and install it. It would say, do you want to install those? And you would say yes. Okay, now I'm going to increase the resolution of the screen. So I'm going to go to activities, and I'm going to type in display. And we've got a little display icon here. I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to change the resolution. Let's change it to something that is 16 by 9. And I'm going to keep it. All right, great. So let's move this window up here. Now, one thing I would also like to do, especially for this video, is I would like to change to what they call scaled mode. And scaled mode means it'll stretch it. So I'm going to go up to View, and I'm going to click Scaled Mode. And it gives me, it looks like it's scaled, but I don't know if my mouse is now working. So let's move my mouse around. And it's not letting me go past the right. I don't know why this is. But on VirtualBox, it's not letting me go past the right in scaled mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my view, and I'm going to go back to full screen mode. All right, so it looks like I'm back in normal mode. Yep, I am. All right. So I'm going to type exit to get out of the terminal. And now I've got my Linux installed. Now, the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to shut down. Now, before I do that, one thing I wanted to make you aware of is that I'm moving between my main host operating system and my guest pretty seamlessly. But notice how when I move my mouse to the right, to the left, or the right, or the top, I can't get out of that operating system window. How am I getting out of the window? Well, on a Mac, the left command key is the release button. And I believe on Windows, it's the right control key. So when I press the left command key, I get this big mouse now that is outside of the operating system, and I can move my CentOS operating system, and I can move things around. If I click on the inside again, it now is part of, my mouse is now moving inside of my operating system. So you're probably getting messages when you want to move inside and out as to what your command key is, and you definitely want to write that down to remember how you get in and out, because it's not seamless going in and out. You might have to press the command key to get out. So I'm going to go ahead and press the command key. I'm back out. I'm going to press inside, and I'm back in. Now, why am I not seeing these is because I turned that off. I said, don't show me that anymore because I remember. So I'm going to go up here to the power button, and I could shut down there, or we had the terminal up and running. I'm going to go back to the terminal, and I'm going to say sudo shutdown now. Ask me for my password, and the operating system now shuts down. So we're going to be living on the terminal a lot. We're going to be messing around with the GUI, but we're going to be messing around with the terminal quite a bit. Okay, so I wanted to talk about a couple of more things before I end this video, and one of the things I wanted to talk about is the Windows subsystem for Linux. That is a way for you to install Linux on Windows without all of this virtualization stuff. I mean, it is virtualization, but it's kind of built into Windows, and you really don't have a nice desktop graphical user interface. It's mainly all command line, but you can do it. And Windows started doing this when the CEO changed to this CEO. I can't remember his name. Forgive me if I get this wrong, but Satya Narayana. And he was a huge Linux fan. And he said, let's go ahead and make Linux terminal available within Windows. So what I've done is I've got a link to a video on how to set all of that up on Windows if you don't want to set up VirtualBox or VMware, if you want to set all that up. So it's mainly for Debian distributions, but the commands are going to be pretty much the same. But really what you should do is you should get used to using a virtualization system, whether it be VMware or VirtualBox. Why? Well, you need to know as much as you can to be a success in this industry. Jobs, and except for IT and security, jobs in programming and things like that are getting kind of rare. And I did this in early 2024. You want to learn as much as you can. You know, I'm a commercial pilot as well, and I actually have to learn as much as I can to be marketable. Like, for instance, I'm a commercial pilot. I'm an airline transport pilot certification. I can fly single engine land, multi-engine land, single engine C, multi-engine C. I can fly all these different airplanes. I can even fly a very small jet. However, if you look at an actual pilot who's actually making money and is very marketable, they know how to fly 737s, 777s, Boeing, and just about any kind of Boeing airplane. You've got to learn as much as you can. So if you're sitting there going, I don't want to learn Linux, I don't want to do any of this, well, you've got to. You've got to learn all of this stuff to become more marketable. And if you only know Windows, and if you're very good at Windows, good for you, but you're going to be at a disadvantage when it comes to finding a job if you don't learn about other operating systems. I mean, when I was hiring IT professionals back in a previous life, the first thing I would look at is how many different operating systems do they know? And if I see Windows, well, everybody has Windows, right? I mean, it's very easy to get. But if I see Windows, and that's all I see, that resume goes off onto the side. However, if I see Windows, Unix, Linux, mainframe, that resume sits in the middle of my desk, and so that's somebody that I'm going to be calling in for another interview. So you need to think about that as you are trying to figure out what it is that you want to do for your career. Now, one other thing also about virtualization is that you need to set up your computer to allow virtualization on your computer if you've never set it up. I have a video also here on how to do that. You can find it in the description of this video on how to set it up before you actually install virtualization. So with all that said, we're starting our Linux adventure together. I want you to get ready, get your virtualization set up, get your Linux installed. We're going to be messing around a lot with CentOS. I'm going to be touching on Debian in future videos. And you know something? Thanks to all of my subscribers. I hope to see you in my next video.